And the wholesale here, of course, like other places in the country, was basically down to zero, as other restaurants that we were supplying to completely closed, and then tentatively started up again and trying to reconfigure perhaps their menu to work out kinks of what made more sense for a COVID world.
Welcome to today's FutureFoodCast. I'm Jim Mason, along with Sachin Sharma, and the two of us work for FutureFoodCast, where we bring thought leaders today in today's food industry to discuss the trends and the technologies that are shaping the future of food. And so that's our focus. We want to really identify what is current today, state of the art, and where is food headed in the food supply chain, one end to the other. And so today I'm lucky to be speaking with Jessica Keahey from Sweet Freedom Cheese in Bentonville, Arkansas. So Jessica, how are you today?
I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there. Well, that's
Just barely.
great. And not all of us are able to do that well. So, but thank you for coming to our foodcast today. We really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, it's an
So
honor.
maybe you can give us a little bit of background about your company. I understand that you founded it.
Yes, I did. I'm the sole founder and owner of Sweet Freedom Cheese. We opened here at the 8th Street Market in Bentonville, Arkansas in the fall of 2018 after much planning, many years of research and trips and lots of cheese eating and lots of book reading and exam taking and such until finally we found the right location, and here we are. So 2018 till today, and of course we've shifted, as many small businesses do, with lots of the offerings that we have that we didn't really think we were going to begin with. And we, again, were the first cut to order shop in Arkansas, and so that was kind of fun, really educating our customers and our consumers about what that meant and about fine artisanal cheeses in this area.
So, well, tell me a little bit. So, and what year was that? Was it 2015, 2016? That
Uh,
you,
2018 is when we
2018 you
actually
opened up.
officially opened this at this location. Yeah.
So, since it was a new company in a new location where, in a sense, you didn't exist before, so nobody really knew about the business to start with. How did you first, in a sense, you opened up the doors? How did customers find you?
Sure. So, many ways. I actually founded the company in 2013, established the S Corp, and in those days, I really had the dream of being a cheesemaker. And so we were initially Sweet Freedom Creamery, and the dream was alive to make cheese in Arkansas, and was really motivated to make that happen. However, that dream changed into Sweet Freedom Cheese as a retailer. Kind of the in-between years, we did amass a lot of followers. We did a lot of classes about cheese making, and which we currently still do. So my heart is really in that, teaching people about the science behind cheese making, and that they can do those sort of simple cheeses at home as well, and really kind of create a lot of appreciation for the artisans that are doing such hard work creating this delicious food and staple. And so we did amass a lot of followers in that. They were very eager for us to finally get open so they could eat the cheese after listening to me talk about it for years and years. But for all the other folks who didn't know, we certainly use social media as a big platform. Really everything we could throw against the wall. I think a lot of word of mouth, which really continues to happen for us, which is fantastic, and reviews and recommendations and such online. But I really think social media and presence of our especially on Facebook initially, and now that's kind of shifted to Instagram, really assisted in getting the word out that we even existed and that we were having a grand opening. And when we did, we opened on a Friday kind of evening. We were only open 4 hours that night, and we had a line out the door for the entire 4 hours. It was, I think, a great shock to all of us that many people showed up and really were interested in what was happening and what we had to offer.
Well, that's great. So it sounds like social media was a big part of getting, I'll call it the initial traffic in the business. And then at this point, I assume it's still an important part of trying to, in a sense, reach out and expand contacts and so on.
Yes, yeah, it continues to be part of how we're reaching out to people. educating them about cheeses, new and olds, and lots of other fun things that are happening with us and at the store. But certainly we use other methods as well. We tend to use a little bit less of just kind of traditional paid marketing. So we
Right.
don't really advertise in newspapers or on TV. We tend to do a bit more in-person events or virtual events as well, and a little bit more one-on-one contact with consumers as well. So I think that word of mouth kind of continues to really benefit us.
Yeah, and it's interesting 'cause I guess my personal experience relating to something like that was many years ago. My parents used to hold an annual sort of a cocktail party and invite the whole neighborhood over, kind of a deal. And when they did that, I always had the assignment of going out and getting all the cheese for the party. So my girlfriend and I would go out and scout all these little shops just like yours, and we'd come back with ridiculous amounts of cheese because my father would accidentally give us his credit card. And so we just blew through a lot of it. But you could see at the party that all the guests were like, wow, when they get, in a sense, not just standard cheeses you get from a grocery store, but really unique things. It really makes a difference, and it really there's a story behind it, so to speak, which is
Absolutely.
interesting. I'm guessing that your company is bringing not just the products, but also the story about the products to everybody. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. We'll talk about cheese to anyone who will stand still long enough, if
Yeah.
they want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Certainly, people come in and they don't. That's part of the challenges too. Is we're in a kind of consumer society where we want to come in and buy the thing and then leave, which I do myself and respect. But
Yeah.
part of our business, for better or for worse, is kind of creating that conversation with our customers, whether if it's just the first time and they're just really curious about what we're doing, or a lot of folks come and they're very intimidated. You see all these cheeses and there's
Yeah.
hundreds of them, and I just like cheddar, man.
That's right.
So we try to educate in a very matter of fact way. We try very, very hard to not be pretentious cheesemongers, but we really enjoy kind of educating the consumer about the cheese, and then learning about them and their palates, and kind of helping them expand that over time, and suggesting new things to them, helping
Mhm.
them get outside their comfort zone and their culinary boundaries, maybe just little by little, until they find themselves a little bit more adventurous eaters. But we really do. I like to say we really do have something for everybody. We have staple cheeses that you would cook with, and then we have high end artisanal cheeses that are lovingly made in tiny batches. We have kind of the whole gamut, but we really focus on things that are not, and historically have not been available, or readily available in this part of the country. And so I think part of that exclusivity, if you will, has really helped us too, because
Yeah, and your point
we've
about
got we've
having
got the goods.
well, yeah, and the big thing is you point out that it's not just what I call the standard products that I can go get somewhere else in a grocery store. It's really a broader set, which is really a challenging thing to do. I remember the first time I went to Europe and I started going into stores over there, and it's like, what's this? What are all these other things that I never see in my country, as I'll call it different varieties and types of cheeses? And in those days, there weren't a lot of people many years ago importing all that stuff. But today, it sounds like you're opening up the doors in Arkansas, at least, to that kind of an experience, which is a big deal.
Sure. Yeah.
So, um, so help me out. Who within your market, which is, I guess, everybody in the larger area of Northwest Arkansas, um, what kinds of customers do you wind up servicing? I assume it's mostly retail families and stuff like that. And
Yes, and wholesale. Is that what you're kind of asking in terms
yeah,
of?
yeah. Who else? Right. Who really buys from you, so to speak? Is
Yeah.
it companies? Is it wholesalers? Is it food service places? Is it somebody
Right.
like me walking in trying to surprise my wife with something strange,
Yeah.
that she's never tasted before?
Yeah, I'd say the bulk of our customers are just retail consumers that come in and want to buy cheese for themselves. But we also do, towards the holidays, especially, a lot of corporate gifting.
Yeah,
And then we also dabbling into online sales a little bit. I know that's the future, and here we go. But mainly it's on-site, consumer sales. And then we also have a growing market of wholesale customers, mainly not food service, but chefs and everything from, breweries to small,
Oh,
tea houses, and everybody for the most part loves cheese.
so when you look at, in a sense, expanding, I'll call it the online side of a business on your end, um, it's really going out, is it going out to your website, looking at the catalog and picking from that, and then having an ordering system for that?
So currently we have online that is for pickup at our location, and then we have also other locations in Northwest Arkansas that are partners.
Mhm.
So we carry their products, they carry ours, and we do that kind of curbside pickup or in-store pickup only at this point. Although uh, we do, people will call us all the time and beg us to ship things, and we certainly do. So we've started to do that. We work with other organizations as well that do online virtual events. And
Oh, cool.
we do a lot of shipping with those sorts of organizations too. So really the next step, I think, for us to really expand, where, like you were saying, our radius essentially is going to be Northwest Arkansas mainly, although we do get a lot of visitors from the surrounding areas, is to, if we really want to expand, either we have another brick and mortar location somewhere else, or we tackle kind of that online. And that, yes, would look as you've described, where we would have an online catalog. A little tricky because what we do is cut to order. We do have a lot of, individual SKU items, but, with UPCs that are roughly a given weight in cheese.
Mhm.
But we, by and large, are cutting to order for the sizes of the customers.
You were open in 2018, building a retail business there, and then COVID comes in a year and a half later, I guess, something like that, and then has an impact. Maybe tell me about where the business was before COVID, what COVID has, in a sense, changed about the business end to end, if you will. And then
Sure.
now that we're moving into a different phase, I mean, even if the pandemic is coming back in a certain way, it's not where it was in 2020, I'll say for sure, from a business perspective. So maybe you can give us a flavor for how all that's impacted you and sort of where you're headed from here, from your point
Sure.
of view.
So this October will be 3 years. So we actually were open shorter for a period of time under normal conditions than we were during kind of COVID conditions. And so it's really hard to say, what was normal. It's more just before and during, because certainly we're not to the after yet. But before, we, of course, focused on retail. We were very slowly building out our wholesale clientele and kind of continued to do that. But it was very small in the beginning. We're very focused on retail, focused on classes here at the shop, and
Yeah.
some other partner locations, but mainly here. We have a dining room that's very small. We were also doing food, and we still continue to do this, but in a different way. But we were doing in-store dining as well. Wine by the glass and glorious cheese plates, and then doing kind of those classroom settings in the same area. COVID came, it was too small really for us to meet spacing requirements when we were able to reopen for that food service area. And so we immediately just shut it down. Initially, we thought maybe temporarily, but it's definitely permanent now. We converted it to dry storage and really leaned into diversifying our food, grocery, gourmet section. So it really helped us do that because we just need more space, kind of bursting at the seams here. And it kind of allowed us to do other things like shipping projects and such that we wouldn't have been able to do before.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of helped us branch out in different ways, and we still continue to do food to go, but it's into kind of the greater market area. So we're part of a large food market where there are many diverse businesses here, but most of them rooted in culinary, and so folks can walk around and enjoy food from different locations. Our we had a couple of different methods of alcohol sales. So we had on-premise permitting here, wine by the glass, which essentially stopped completely.
Yeah.
And we started focusing a little more on our off-premise as people were more apt to buy a hunk of cheese and take the bottle of wine and go home. We're seeing kind of a mix of everything happening now. We now are what's known as an entertainment district, and that just got passed this last week. So I think that's really going to help us kind of return to that. And help us boost some of those sales while still maintaining, now our dining room, come bulk area.
Mhm.
And it's really going to help us kind of explore what's the next step for us.
Well, yeah, it's
So
interesting because it sounds like COVID forced you into some changes
sure,
that wouldn't have happened automatically. But
absolutely.
on the other hand, what's happened as a result of that, you actually took a closer look at how to open up these other markets with wholesale and, as you say, chefs and so on, some of those contacts and broadened out your product line. So all those are good
Right.
things. Obviously, there's no
Yeah.
reason to get rid of those. It's just hopefully the
Mhm.
opportunity to do more on the retail side comes back as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the wholesale here, of course, like other places in the country, was basically down to zero as other restaurants that we were supplying to completely closed, and then tentatively started up again, and trying to reconfigure perhaps their menu to work out kinks of what made more sense for a COVID world. So we're seeing a lot of that wholesale business return. We did a lot of events, offsite, on-site events. Hosting private parties and such, and more,
Mhm.
like I said, in-person classes. That of course none of that happened. Everything went
Yeah.
from whatever to zero, and we determined virtual classes were really the way to go. So we jumped on that as quickly as possible. And if we'd all, just invested in Zoom, right, in
Yeah. Yeah.
2018, but we kind of realized that that was a way for us to reach other people. So our dining room very small. We could cram maybe 20 people in here max, but with virtual, it's unlimited, so we can reach many more people. And folks tend to have, I think, a really great time because they can participate as much as they want. There's no pressure for them, to get gussied up and come to the cheese shop,
Right. Right.
and be embarrassed by direct questions.
So tell me a little bit more about, from a business perspective, sort of, I understand the products a little bit, the market, how you've come about and everything else. Anything about, I'll call it sustainability initiatives that have impacted you in any way?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of from day one, we wanted to try and be as sustainable as possible. We are very, very fortunate to have a company based here in Northwest Arkansas called Food Loops, and they are a great supplier of compostable and eco containers. And so we
Mhm.
almost exclusively use all of their products. And 8th Street Market here has been a big proponent of recycling and composting, and so we have all of that kind of at our fingertips where the customers can take those products and put them in the appropriate bins. Most of our cheese paper and other things are compostable as well. There's a few things that aren't, but we really try to focus on zero waste. We also are able to minimize our cheese wastage as well. We keep very close look on expiration calendars, and how we essentially can move cheese in creative ways, perhaps, or focus on those cheeses that need to find homes. They're a little orphans, and they need love too, and just maybe focusing on those with customers as well. So again, pre-COVID, a little bit easier, but we're a try before you buy model, which means that the customers can come to us, and if they are curious about a cheese, then we can give them a sample. And I feel like a sample is worth 1,000 descriptors. We of course can talk about the cheesemaker and the history and the story behind the cheese and how the cheese is made, and the animals, and et cetera, et cetera. But if we get it to them in their mouths and it's delicious and they love it, then that's it. That
Hmm. Yeah, it's
that
an
speaks
interesting
wonders
thing.
in volumes.
Well, it's interesting because you have this product that is very, I'll call it unique. So there's a standard part of the product we're all familiar with. I'll call it orange cheese, my cheddar, my, standard Swiss that I pick up off the supermarket shelves as my slices or whatever. But when you get into all the variations that you have, it is unique. And there is, as you say, a big story around it. You are packaging kits. Have you thought of, in a sense, putting together, quote, it sounds stupid, I'll say something like the history of cheese kits, where
Mm,
you can say, hey, here's a kind of a cheese, whatever it is, a soft cheese or whatever it is. And you do have to worry about packaging it, but being able to ship those out in a sense,
sure.
to people and say, hey, you don't just get, I'll call it a half pound of cheese or whatever it is, as you said, your little boards or whatever. You get a mix of product, if you will, and a history that goes along with it. It's pretty neat to try to build a base, if you will, of people that want to come back just to learn more, not just to sample cheese, but even to learn
Yeah,
more about different cheeses. So that'd be kind of neat.
absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have customers that come in, and they want an education, and they want to take their time to learn from us, which is really great.
Yeah.
So we're happy
Excellent.
to do it. Yeah, and I've certainly in the past we've taught classes about the history of cheese and Cheese Boat 101. We always kind of rope that into as well, which is very popular, and history of cheese in America and history of cheddar, etc. There's really a lot behind it. It's such an interesting topic.
Yeah. So another topic that is important in quote the food supply chain for everybody, not just the pandemic and the supply chain disruptions that everybody's had, but also we have that new Food Safety Modernization Act that was passed by Congress that is becoming, it comes into effect in 2024. It affects the entire food supply chain. And so when we think of things like that, it adds additional responsibilities to everybody in the food supply chain. And that says not only things like sanitation and food handling practices, but also things like challenges like recalls on product, the ability to support that. So, my experience is similar to everybody else's in the US, that we all remember when stores didn't have romaine lettuce for, I guess it was like 4 months or something back in, I think it was 2017 or whatever, all because we didn't have any way to do recalls at that point. So any thoughts on how you're impacted by, I'll call it the food safety challenges?
Sure. Yeah. I having started out in the cheese making world, well, really starting out in engineering and then going into the cheesemaking world, and then here we are in the retail world. I'm really focused on problem solving and really doing things by the book, and then the
Yeah.
engineering background kind of bleeding through. But as a cheesemaker, I did go get certified as a PCQI. Probably the first person in Arkansas for dairy specific, because I had to go up to Penn State. They were I think only people in the country doing it at the time for dairy specific, and it was really interesting to be a part of that. And then shortly thereafter, again changing to retail, but having that focus and kind of understanding what was happening and where it was going was very, very valuable. To being on this side, which maybe not all retailers, were prepared for, kind of seeing
Right.
that happening. So I feel very fortunate to have that education and those resources. And we're extremely stringent here about food safety. I said we do everything by the letter, but recalls have always been, I wrote your recall plan for Sweet Freedom Creamery, how we were going to recall cheese, heaven forbid.
Yeah.
And I certainly saw it happen, to creameries across the country, and knew you've got to be prepared. That's the number one there.
Yeah.
But on the retailer side, you've got to be prepared as well, especially as we're wholesaling to other customers as well. So we do digital tracking, and everything that comes in gets recorded in. We're small enough, we don't do that digitally, but everything has paper documents. We take every product and make sure that we record all the data that is associated with that. So the event of a recall, and then we get those notices every day from FDA. Go down the list.
Yes.
Is there anything? So that we can kind of be a part of that. One step up, one step down as well. So yeah, very, very, very important to do that, even at the scale that we are. Right, we owe that to our consumers and our customers.
So it is a hard thing to do. It's a lot of,
Sure.
the bad news
Yeah.
is, like anything else, unfortunately, it's an overhead cost. It has nothing to do with the cost of you buying cheese or cutting cheese or selling it to me. It's overhead that you, in a sense, wind up having to, in a sense, pay for, in effect, as a price. So the only question I would have is around that. I know Sweet Freedom Cheese is not a very large company. It's not like you're the equivalent of Walmart when it comes to automation or anything like that.
Right.
So even though they're just down the road, the bigger thing is, are there any technologies that help you at all in trying to manage this stuff that you're?
Oh, we, as far as recalls, we haven't had to participate in one.
Yes.
Thank the heavens, the cheesy gods looking down upon us. But I think everything is done manually, essentially whenever we're receiving shipments. So we actually are
Okay.
able to put eyes on it, to record those lot codes manually. So someone is always looking at it and is absolutely accountable. And I think also it's very difficult for us because we have so many suppliers, small and large. We work directly with some people as well. And so it becomes very challenging when we have lots of deliveries and invoices kind of thrown at us while we're, operating the shop as well. So it's I think, advantageous for us to be able to take a moment to be able to manually look at that shipment, make sure everything looks copacetic, to manually record all of that, to put that onto a, a manual calendar that we can keep up with, and then to essentially keep all of those records. So as small as we are, it doesn't really make sense for us to kind of convert all of that digitally, but I can see how advantageous that would be, for larger
Yes.
companies, absolutely, to streamline
Yeah.
that process.
So you bring up another challenge, I guess, in the business. As you said, you have lots of suppliers. You don't have a short list. It's not like here, take two hands and put them all on two hands, and that's your suppliers. I can imagine how challenging that is. And some of those would be, I'll call it normal companies that you could buy multiple items from, like importers or something like that. But to your point, it sounds like that you're also dealing directly in some cases with individual producers. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we sell more than cheese, of course. We sell, jams and jellies and crackers and chocolates and accoutrements and, all sorts of delicious things. And so we're working with a lot of different suppliers for all of those products, outside of even the cheese and the charcuterie. And some of it's, as you say, direct. Quite a bit of it winds up being direct, but if we can consolidate it, of course, it's much more helpful. And then those distributors essentially are doing their checks and balances, and we can rely on them versus us having to do it for every individual supplier. But sometimes it's just how it is, and it works a little bit easier. And
Well,
folks
it's a
really,
lot of work.
yeah, it is a lot of work, but folks want to see local products as well. And so we work individually with local suppliers, and it adds up. You're right. It's a big overhead and labor cost too, but it's very
Well,
important.
I mean, the great thing is you're direct sourcing some stuff, which is really nice. And you get to know who the producers are,
Sure.
what they can do well and all that. So you're bringing to market something that's not a generic product, which is a huge win in the end for the customer. But it is a lot of work to stay in touch with all of those individual producers for
Mhm.
sure, and figure out what do you have this month or this week, that's fresh and different and whatever else. To have to go through that all the time, because I'm sure they're all getting hit like everybody else with their own supply chain problems. So if you called me and said, "Hey Jim, do you have medium cheddar cheese available?" I might have said yes last week, but you better call this week because I may not have it for whatever reason. So
Right? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And so you've just kind of got to roll with it, honestly.
yeah,
Yeah, pre small business owner is very adverse to change. I like stability. The engineer
yeah,
in me wants to circle the answer, and that's
right,
the answer.
yeah,
But I've learned a lot and had to change certainly.
yeah,
Who I am, my personality, in accepting change, and having to pivot as quickly as possible for those things. So great, you don't have that cheddar, fine, let's look for something else. Or
right.
I you know yes, we had a lot of products that we were able to get over the past year, and some of them still, production, as cheese just can't automatically magically appear. It's a
No,
process, especially aged cheeses.
right,
So it takes time. And so a lot of the cheesemakers are starting to see an increase in their supply again, whereas last year they were essentially pouring milk down the drain in some places. And so now they're seeing that happen, but it's taking them time to get that inventory built up again. And if they're aging it out in kind of a natural environment, it takes that environment some time to kind of balance back out again. And so we're certainly seeing some shortages there. However, I just see, it is an opportunity. If we have to be optimistic, which I think we really have to be, it's an opportunity, versus being kind of pessimistic about the challenges. It's an opportunity for us to look for other suppliers, other producers, or also just to say, well, what are you doing now? Because a lot of those cheesemakers, instead of making ABC what they were doing before, and it just essentially wasn't working, they also reinvented the wheel. Maybe they made smaller format cheeses that made more sense for consumers. Maybe they were making fresher style cheeses that didn't require that aging. And maybe they were making, something totally different, and it worked for them kind of for the COVID world. And so it's kind of helped us freshen up, some of our inventory too, which is, our customers want a lot of the same cheeses. They want to come in and they want that truffle gouda. They want that
yes,
every time they come in. We have those mainstays, but we rotate a lot as well. And that's part of the education with the customers, is letting them know, cheeses are going to be different. Some of them aren't available every year. It's a seasonal product.
right.
The goats and the sheep, they don't give milk all year round. And so kind of explaining that to them is very helpful. But again, that's kind of part of that overhead and labor. And you can't just hire someone immediately and they have all this, glorious cheese knowledge. It really takes time. Just like a sommelier would build their knowledge. I'm a certified cheese professional through the American Cheese Society, and it's really, not a lot of people know what that is, but it's a symbol essentially of kind of the cheese knowledge that I hold. But it just can't stop there because there's always new things happening. So you kind of have to constantly be learning and trying, and it's a fun industry to be in.
Well, it is. It sounds interesting. It's challenging. I mean, I know from having had the opportunity to go to stores occasionally like yours that really have a nice variety of things. It's phenomenal when you go in there and the samples you can get, and I'll call it the experiences, and learn about different flavors and so on. But the thing that's interesting to me is it does sound like, in a sense, you're the human version of a communication channel across your supply chain. Because on the one end, you've got to stay in touch all the time with all of these. You have the importers, and they may have more of what I call, even though they have some rotation in their own product lines, they at least have some level of predictability maybe for you. But the direct suppliers, maybe it's even more challenging to try to understand that. And on the other hand, you have the consumers like myself who are saying, as you said, I want to buy something. So you're literally trying to become a communication channel on both ends to
Yep.
educate both ends of us to tie us
Yeah.
together efficiently for what it's worth. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, so communication is a huge part of what you do, honestly, as a business for
Mhm.
sure, tying it all together.
Yeah.
So that gave me a good picture of, in a sense, what you're trying to do from a connection perspective. So, Sachin, let me ask you, do you have any questions that I haven't covered, Sachin, that you want to ask
Uh,
Jessica?
no, I think you pretty much covered everything. The only question probably I had was something to do with the, the trends and the vision in the cheese industry, because I know you do a lot of social media and marketing stuff. So I just wanted to kind of understand, how are the viewers looking at it? How are the cheese consumers looking at it now and then in the future? Because we keep hearing from many people about information about the food, messaging of the food, and the process to make that, and what are the different nutritional aspects of it. So
Mhm.
maybe if you can build upon that, what sort of feedbacks you get, and some of those things.
Yeah, sure. That's a big question. So when COVID started, it's very interesting trends. People were coming in and they were stocking up on more staple cheeses, so hard cheeses in larger quantities. Buying that chunk of cheddar and that chunk of Parmesan, and going home. Very quick shopping experiences. Kind of before, it was a little more leisurely, like let's try all the cheeses. Maybe we'll get a smidgen of this, smidgen of that. But with kind of the beginning of COVID, really cheesemakers were seeing a lot of soft cheeses not moving, and so
Right.
there's a lot of cheeses sitting in a lot of warehouses, essentially, and harder cheeses maybe would be able to sustain some time hanging out, aging out a little bit more, but those soft guys really need to move, and so there was a big push through kind of the cheese world of trying to give some love to the softies, essentially. And we kind of saw that go through, and then people kind of came up again. And then I think we were really looking for, as consumers, a lot of comfort foods. People were, if you look at alcohol numbers, alcohol
Okay.
sales across the United States went up pretty substantially, as people were doing that. But also soft cheeses started to go up again as people were looking for something. Again, those comfort foods. And as we are now, it's wildly unpredictable. So that's probably one of our biggest challenges. Before, if you'd asked me in 2019, I would have said, oh, natural, organic, flavored cheeses, particularly spicy, things with peppers. Those were the cheeses essentially that were the emerging markets. But now, it's kind of all over the place. And also being kind of hyper local and having that ability to educate consumers. Social media has a huge power. We started creating what we called pantry boxes with kind of some staple foods in it, because I don't know about you guys, but even in our area, some staple foods like, people were going, cuckoo for sourdough. Bread was kind of hard to find. Milk was kind of hard to find. Eggs were kind of hard to find. And so we actually started creating these boxes that always had local milk, local bread, different kinds of cheeses and then some accompaniments. And it helped us essentially move product, but also introduce kind of interesting products to our consumers. So we really liked doing that. It was fun. And so we kind of continue to do that now. And we use that as an opportunity to educate the consumers. But we'll feature, some of the cheeses on Facebook and Instagram. We will absolutely have people come in, even weeks later. Oh, I don't want that box, but I saw that cheese and, I want some of that. And they, don't know anything about it other than they saw it on social media and they really, really want to try it and take some home. So it's really interesting. Kind of in the middle of COVID too, we call it, the great feta. What can I jokingly call it here? The great feta TikTok phenomenon of 2020. We sold more feta than we normally would, and it was very confusing. Feta is a staple product, and there's a lot of different varieties out there, but people would come in and want feta, and that's what they would buy, and they would leave. It was very unusual. And then suppliers started running out of feta, and I, as a little bit older, I think, than the average TikTok user, perhaps. But my staff is a bit younger, and we all started realizing that this trend was happening with feta on TikTok, and it just exploded, and it wiped out essentially large parts of the country of feta, period, which was really, really just a bizarre phenomenon. And how do you predict for that? How on earth, do you predict for something like that happening? You have some influencers that just make, this really yummy looking pasta, and then people go nuts for it, and everyone sells out of feta. It's interesting. Yeah.
So
It's like Elon Musk talking about Dogecoin, and boom, the price of Dogecoin kind of going high.
Yeah. So again, it's hard to predict what the kind of new trends specifically for cheeses are. We kind of have mainstays in our case that we definitely track. Compared to what we started with our inventory in 2018, it's very different than what we have now. As consumers ask for things, we bring them in, and we really try to we have that advantage of being able to rotate things. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then we won't bring it in, or we won't bring it in for another period of time, and then maybe we'll try it again. And certainly things that didn't work in 2018, we've tried again, and people love it now. So it's just kind of, I think, building that consumer clientele that is willing to maybe try some of the weirder stuff, or being able to explain to them, how to use it. And when we put things out there in the world, whether it's the pantry boxes or social media or newsletters that are kind of meal based. So if we have recipes that go along with it, or this is a kit and you have all the things that you need, people really respond to that as well. Certainly, there are folks out there that really want to take the time and cook and are really culinarians. And I used to be that, pre-business owning. But most people, especially I think with just the fatigue of everything that's gone on for the last few years, really need things to be simplified and kind of a little bit easier, but don't really want to give up, those great flavors too. So if we can kind of package something that's a whole meal, then we've seen a lot better response for that.
Well, that sounds brilliant, because I would say the market, if you look at it, my son is actually a phenomenal chef. I mean, he's self-trained as, French chef, Italian. He has all these culinary experiences that he's educated himself on, and he's absolutely phenomenal. But the world isn't like that. Most of us are more like me, culinary challenged. We have a hard time making an omelet. And the fact that you can say for the 90% of you, like Jim, we've got a plan that says we're going to give you the ability that you can do more than just an omelet with just egg in it. You can put something else in there.
Right.
With your kits is a phenomenal idea. So we all benefit from that. And what's interesting, you hit another point that was right. When you talked about the fact that you tried something in 2019, it didn't work, and you brought it back now, and all of a sudden it took off for some unknown reason. I will say, honestly, in my own family, we do the same thing with food. So we'll try something. I did a lousy job cooking it, or wherever I got it wasn't so good. But then you run out of what I call new experiences, right? And so you cycle back, and a year from now or 18 months from now, somebody's going to bring back the same thing, and you're going to try it again and say, wow, I appreciate that flavor now where I didn't before. So recycling what I call flavors, or cycling through them, over and over again in your, I'll call it food boxes, is a great idea, along with the recipes for those of us that are challenged. That's great. The last thing that you hit that I thought was actually brilliant is going to put you in total control of the entire market now, which I think honestly is your idea on TikTok. So if you've seen it about the feta cheese, so you've seen like the milk carton challenge and all of those. Literally, you can say, "I, Jessica," and throwing out a milk carton challenge. Who can stand on top of a milk carton and have a pound of cheddar? And so you can make up your own TikTok, what I call programs and challenges, and see how well they go. But you're right. There is a lot of power to social media done right. And the fun part about it is when people do what I call these crazy activities, like those TikTok challenges, if you make them what I call safe, but creative in a way, there is a chance to get what I call high engagement and, in a sense, have I'll call it a big spread of those messages into a market, which is kind of neat. So I think it sounds like all the power is back in your hands now with social media. You can overcome anything.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, we need to create a TikTok channel, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
One of the thing,
For that.
one of the interesting things is like cheese, when I was little, the first time we got exposure to was the Indian cheese, which is called the paneer. It's a cheese which has very low shelf life. So pretty soft cheese, So that's what we grow up eating. And that's one of the premium food kind of you can have. And I made it myself. One question I want to just squeeze in is in terms of, the variety of cheese, global use of cheese. I mean, how are the consumers looking at cheese? Has it changed? Are they only looking for the American kind of cheese or the European cheese, or has there some interest built up, in recent days about, what sort of cheese are there? I mean, I have heard about camel cheese.
Oh yeah. Camel cheese, donkey cheese. Yeah. Some strange things out there. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the history of cheese in America is a long and storied topic, but essentially, we weren't creating a lot of farmstead, small creamery cheeses. We were mainly doing, government cheese and large industry kind of commercial cheeses until really the late 70s, early 80s, when, some scrappy, a lot of them like back to the landers with a few too many goats, started making cheese. And, a lot of them went to France and learned, the artisanal, goat cheese making techniques there and brought that back. But 1983, America was not ready for a soft goat cheese, except for, just a few chefs that were really, I think, willing to take that risk. And of course now everybody takes it for granted. Goat cheese on a salad. It's just, that's average and every day now. But not that long ago, it was a very unique phenomenon. And I grew up with, cheese in the house, but we didn't have fancy cheese, in southern Arkansas. I was aware perhaps of some other cheeses, but I grew up on pre-sliced and pre-shredded stuff, and occasionally we'd have the fancy cheese ball, but we weren't having any sort of accessibility to kind of fine cheeses really made in the US. It hadn't made its way into Arkansas in the 80s by any means. And then really until the last couple of decades, we've started to see that happening a lot more. A lot of creameries essentially are starting or widening their distribution network as people are becoming more open to it. And a lot of it started at farmers markets and has widened out from there. I think our palates certainly have been changing. And not really all that long ago.
All right, I want to thank you, Jessica, for coming into FutureFoodCast, and I want to encourage the audience to go out to sweetfreedomcheese.com and learn much more about cheese and much more about what Jessica's team is offering for both products and services. So definitely, if you're interested in finding out more about cheese, that is definitely the right place to go. So with that, I want to thank everybody and look forward to having all of you join me in a cheese challenge on TikTok at some point. So
terrific. I look forward to it.
All right.
Thanks for having me so much. It's such an honor.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.